I get this question all the time, people saying, I want to get a friend for my rabbit, but I don't know, does gender matter? Does it need to be the same sex or the opposite sex to my rabbit? So first of all, let me say, if you've already got a friend for your rabbit, don't worry about it. These are just kind of the ideal scenarios in some bonds. So as you know, every rabbit is different, every bond is different. This is just general kind of advice. If you have the choice about what kind of friend, this is my general advice of how to go about that and which would be a good choice for your rabbit in theory. But they're all different, and this is just my experience of what has worked well for people in the past. But if you already have a rabbit, don't panic. Don't turn around and go, oh my gosh, my rabbit is the same sex or my rabbit is a different size. Don't worry about it. It is what it is if you've already selected your rabbit and you love them already, I'm sure, and you'll make it work. So don't worry about it. It's just that in an ideal scenario, sometimes this can be an easier bond if the rabbits are more compatible from these points of view. And these are just guidelines, okay? So first of all, does sex matter? So I get asked this an awful lot. So in theory, no. You'll see a lot of people saying it doesn't really matter once they're neutered. But in my experience, for people who are new to bonding, an opposite sex bond is easiest. And the reason that is because males and females tend to display different kind of behaviors when they're bonding. And in my experience, mostly the girls are dominant and they really care about being the boss and making sure that the guy knows that she's the boss. Whereas the guys, sometimes they're dominant. Occasionally it happens, but I would say in 90% of the bonds that I've done that are male-female, the female comes out on top. And the males tend to kind of go, am I being fed? Am I being groomed? Am I being cuddled? Yeah, I don't really care that much then. So that's kind of how I have found it. I find that males tend to be quite laid back once they're neutered. So in a male-female pair, they kind of naturally have opposite personalities. And in order for a bond to work, you actually need them to be opposite. You need not necessarily opposite personalities, but opposite in the hierarchy. So you need one rabbit to be dominant and for the other rabbit to give in to that and to be submissive in order for it to actually work. And male and female bonds tend to quite often fall naturally into that sort of category where the females tend to be dominant and the males tend to be more submissive. So of course, like everything, it's not always the case, but in general, that's what I found. So I think if you're new to bonding, I think that can make an easier kind of a bond for you. Like they can all be difficult, of course, or they can fall in love straight away. But generally speaking, they tend to fall into that camp and it tends to be smoother because of that. So if you have any kind of a choice about it, that's what I would definitely recommend. So you also then hear that two males don't work. Now that's a very outdated viewpoint, but it's still knocking around. I don't know why. Because I've actually done lots and lots and lots of male bonding. I would say probably 70% of the bonds that I have done are male. And a lot of them are actually rebonds because males tend to fall out before they actually are old enough to be neutered. And therefore, two males should never be sold as babies together by a breeder or a pet shop, as far as I'm concerned, because the chance of them falling out and hurting each other before you can neuter them tends to be really high. And pet shops don't always warn you about that. And people don't always know that their rabbits actually need neutering, because if they did know that, they could get them booked in as soon as they got their rabbits and they might be able to avoid that. But a lot of places tell them, oh, it's fine, they're the same sex, you don't need to neuter them. And any rabbits that are living together ought to be neutered, no matter whether they're siblings or what gender they are. And that's because you take the hormones out of the equation altogether. And if you do that, then you're only dealing with the personalities, which can be difficult enough on its own. And you should always get baby rabbits neutered as soon as you possibly can for that reason, because the hormones kick in and they tend to fall out. Males more than females, yes. And occasionally you get a pair of females who won't actually fall out and they actually live happily together and they're fine. But the problem with it is that any unneutered rabbits are going to have hormone surges their whole lives. And so as a result of that, what happens is they're going to fall out. Even if they're fine, even if they bond fine at the beginning, or if they've lived together at the beginning, what happens is they have a hormone surge and they just can fall out of the blue one day and they can really, really hurt each other. So it's best to get them neutered as soon as possible. So two males, in my opinion, they're an easy enough bond. They're the next easiest after male and female. I've done lots of them and I don't worry at all when people say I've got two boys and I go, yeah, that's grand, no problem. Two females, in my opinion, tend to be the hardest. And I think that's because of what I was saying to you earlier on about them being dominant, where quite often they both want to be dominant. But sometimes what happens is you get two dominant rabbits and they're fighting at the start of the bonding because they both want to be boss. But normally what I find with given enough time is that one of them actually submits and gives in. It's very unusual for you to have two rabbits who are dominant the whole way through and one of them doesn't give in, because usually their natural instinct to have a friend kicks in and they prefer that to being dominant. They'd rather have a friend and be submissive than being dominant.